The ending of Fire Force is pretty well wrapped up. Thanks to Shinra, the world is revitalized and everyone is revived. Ignition abilities are taken away, thus ending spontaneous human combustion, and the World Hero Force is created for those with strong souls to continue protecting humanity. Even past that, Shinra grows up and has two kids, one with Iris and one with Inca. The whole thing is wrapped up in a nice little bow. But what happens after the end of Fire Force? Before we get started on discovering the answer to this question, it'd be great if you dropped a like on the video for the algorithm and subscribe to see future Fire Force content here on the channel. Let's start with the most obvious things first. What happens after the end of Fire Force? Well, Soul Eater happens, of course. After the period of time that's only described as the far distant future, Lord Death creates his first fragment Asura, and the witch Arachne successfully creates demon weapons inspired by Excalibur, the weapon of none other than the Night King Arthur Boyle himself. About 800 years after that, Maka Albarn, Black Star, Death the Kid, and Soul Evans are born sometime adjacent to each other, chaos ensues, the Kishin Asura is released, a lot of other stuff happens, Maka punches Asura really hard, and the world is saved. Hooray, victory for Team Courage. That is definitely what happened. Jokes aside, there are some things that need to happen after Fire Force for Soul Eater to even exist. First and foremost, Inca has to go on to create the Witch Order, or at the very least plant those seeds for someone to pick up later. Maybe the child she has with Shinra defects from the World Hero Force and decides to pick up witchery as a hobby, who knows. There are two reasons why I believe it has to be Inca that builds the foundation of the Witch Order, however. One is her natural attraction to destruction and danger matches up with the pull of magic and the effect it has on witches that makes them naturally destructive beings. Another being that the symbols on Inca's hoodie in her introduction are similar to the symbols on Medusa's clothes in Soul Eater, being a nod to the first witch that we see in Soul Eater. The next thing that needs to happen is the formation of the Star Clan. I think it's extremely obvious that Rekka Hoshimiya is the first member of the Star Clan. Besides his affiliation with the star in his eyes and name, the Hoshi and Hoshimiya mean star, Rekka is also prone to becoming overtaken by power and madness, much like the entirety of the Star Clan and Soul Eater that were exterminated because they got power hungry and started eating human souls. Even Black Star, who was still a baby when he was taken into the DWMA, eventually started walking down the path of the demon, seeking nothing but power. After Rekka is revived by Shinra, he says he's going to set out on a journey to master the martial arts, and I can imagine somewhere on this journey he fell down the wrong path and started the Star Clan's cursed destiny. As well as the fact that almost every line of Rekka's in the manga is followed up by a star shape, much in the same way that there is an actual star shape in Black Star's name. It's kinda sad to think that even after being given a second chance, he still ended up going crazy. In chapter 302, Lord Death says he'll make a place for a god like himself to stay, and that's either the Death Room or the state of Nevada itself. It's more than likely the Death Room, but for some reason it's just infinitely funnier if Lord Death created Nevada. And that actually brings up another question. Are the continents just a part of Shinra's imagination that he ended up creating while he was Shinra Banshoman, or did Lord Death create the continents and name them? Just hear me out. In Soul Eater, the 7 continents obviously exist since the Death Sides monitor different parts of the world and places such as Italy exist, so at the very least, the world in Soul Eater is very similar to the real world geographically. However, in Fire Force, the planet is basically falling apart due to the first great cataclysm, and there are few known nations that have any life in them. So basically, I'm just wondering if Shinra recreated the geography of the world exactly how it is in Soul Eater, if Lord Death did it, or if it just happened naturally over the course of human history after Shinra revitalized the planet. Moving away from geography, there also had to be the cultivation of the power system of Soul Eater. Lord Death took away ignition abilities, and in exchange, those with strong souls receive superhuman abilities that sometimes exceed their previous ignition abilities, while the rest of the world remained unpowered. Now, Meisters, besides Arthur, didn't exist and couldn't have existed until 800 years before Soul Eater, when weapons were made, so I'm guessing Arthur created the base set of abilities Meisters have, or at least started to. We know Arthur has soul perception, so maybe he eventually discovered things like soul menace, and maybe Shinra told him about soul resonance, or he could have just stumbled upon it himself. Quite literally nothing is impossible for Arthur. That guy doesn't know the meaning of impossible. Fun fact, these people with strong souls actually carry on into the far distant future of Soul Eater through Mifune, who doesn't have any Meister abilities, nor does he wield a demon weapon, thus explaining how he's so powerful. While we're on the topic of power systems, and Arthur actually, something that I often question is what the 8th power that Lord Death couldn't take away was. After taking away the abilities of Shinra, Sho, Haumea, Iris, Benimaru, Inca, and Nataku, he says they're too powerful for any human to have, and then says he wanted to collect all 8 but one wasn't on Earth at the time. The immediate answer that comes to mind is Arthur, who was literally floating in space at the time, so I'm guessing his powers were taken after he got back to the planet, is what I would say if that were the end to this theory. There was one more being in space with Arthur, one with power too great for any human being to wield themselves, a power so strong that you have to comply with a ridiculous amount of rules to even use it. Of course, I'm talking about none other than Excalibur himself. It's widely known that Excalibur is the most powerful weapon in Soul Eater above even the Death Scythes. He can turn a failure of a Meister like Hero into someone who can beat Blackstar, Kid, and Killick all at the same time. But since he has that ridiculous rule set and annoying personality to match, no human can actually wield his power. Thus, he gets to keep it and live on into that far distant future. Sometime in between the end of Fire Force and the beginning of Soul Eater, I also like to think the events of Eatee happen. If you don't know what Eatee is, it's the manga Atsushi Okubo published before Soul Eater. While not being confirmed to be connected to Soul Eater or Fire Force, it contains a lot of concepts and character designs that are reworked and used in Soul Eater, so I'm doing the connecting myself. The main character, Shotaro, is a Blackstar prototype. Mana looks exactly like early Soul Eater Patty and is even wearing her hat. A character named Radaji looks a lot like Ox Ford and even has the lightning powers to match. There's also the fact that Justin Law's attack, the law-abiding silver gun, exists as an actual physical gun. Charisma Justice, a comic book character in Soul Eater, is real in this story, and the biggest calling card connecting these 3 series is the moon created by Benimaru being present in the sky. Before this video ends, I'd like to have a bit of fun and try to make some familial connections between the Soul Eater and Fire Force casts. Starting with the most obvious one, we have Shinra, who created Lord Death, who in turn created Asura and Death the Kid. Kid was also created in the image of Shinra, so that makes sense. Due to their similar character designs, or at least them having the same design trait, I think Soul could be a descendant of Sho, which would technically make Kid and Soul distant relatives. Inca and Kim, that one's pretty obvious, they're both witches, pink hair and all that. Rekka and Blackstar, like I mentioned earlier, I think that one's pretty obvious as well. I think some people would say Mifune is a relative of Arthur, and I kind of get that. They both have strong souls and are just incredibly powerful swordsmen, but I'm actually giving that spot to Hero. They look kind of similar, and Hero was able to put up with Excalibur for a considerably longer time than anyone else. And for the last one, I have Tamaki and Blair. This is based off the fact that they're just both fan service cat girls, and that's literally it. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Give me your Fire Force or Soul Eater theories. I'd love to read them. And that's it for this one. Also, Soul Eater Not technically happens after Fire Force, but let's be honest, who the hell cares about Soul Eater Not?
Lately I'm feeling so cool. Yeah. Come and get a taste of the hip soul food. Spice up the animal when Neo haiku. While soul goes to school, way slash kung fu.